Let's dive into the hidden world of the slow texter. If you've ever taken hours, maybe even a whole day to reply to a message, you know exactly what I'm talking about. But what if that delay isn't you being rude or uninterested? What if it's actually a sign of a really deep, thoughtful mind at work? Does this look familiar to you? The notification pops up, you read the message, you might even have an answer ready to go, but you just pause. You don't reply yet. So what is really going on in that moment of hesitation? All right, so here's how we're going to break this all down. First up, we'll look at the big gap between what people think is happening and what's really going on. Then we'll get into the brain's own defense system, explore what it means to have a mind that's just built for deep thinking, and finally, we'll talk about how you can embrace this part of yourself. Okay, let's start with the heart of the matter, the slow reply struggle. Because on one side, you've got how other people see your delayed response. And on the other, you've got the complex stuff that's actually happening inside your head. Let's really get into that difference. So a lot of the time, people just assume a slow reply means you're being distant, maybe even rude, or just plain uninterested. But the psychological reality? It's something else entirely. It's actually a sign of deep processing, of managing your cognitive load, and being really intentional with your emotional energy. This isn't a character flaw, it's a mental function. And that leads us perfectly to our second point, your brain's own defense system. See, this habit isn't really about avoiding people, it's about protecting your mental resources. The key idea here has a name. It's called cognitive inhibition. And it's this incredible ability your brain has to stop an automatic emotional impulse and instead choose a logical, thought-out response. So instead of just firing off a knee-jerk reply, your brain deliberately hits the pause button. So here's how that actually works, step by step. First, the notification arrives. Then you get that initial impulse to just react right away. But then comes step 3, and this one is crucial, the pause. This is where cognitive inhibition kicks in, letting your thinking brain catch up to your reactive brain, which is what leads to a much more thoughtful response. That pause is basically your brain's way of protecting its cognitive bandwidth. Think of your mental energy just like the battery on your phone. It is a finite resource. And every little task, every interaction drains it just a little bit. Look, your brain is already juggling huge things like work projects and big family decisions. Instant replies, they might seem small, but they chip away at that limited energy. By pausing, you're not ignoring the message, you're just waiting for a moment when you have the mental space to give a real, thoughtful answer instead of a rushed or forced one. And this brings us right to our third section. Understanding what it's like to have a mind that's just built for depth. This is often why those simple, quick replies can feel surprisingly hard. This quote, it just hits the nail on the head. For a mind that's wired for depth, a simple question like, "Hey, what are you up to?" Well, it's not just a question. It's an invitation to a pretty complex mental process. Your mind isn't just seeing the words on the screen. It sees this whole web of possibilities. It's analyzing all these different angles, potential outcomes, and various interpretations all at once. The reason you delay your response is because you're mentally running through the consequences of your words, trying to pick the ones that perfectly capture what you really mean. That delay is also a really powerful sign of emotional intelligence. When a message triggers a feeling, whether it's stress or pressure or even excitement, a slow texter doesn't let that initial feeling dictate their immediate reaction. And there's actually neuroscience to back this up. Reacting instantly can literally spike stress hormones like cortisol. But by pausing, you give your brain time to process that emotion, which helps bring those stress levels back down. This isn't about being unfeeling, it's about being in control. You're putting a little space between the feeling and the final action. So after all of this, what's the big takeaway? Well, it's that it's time to completely reframe this habit and really start to embrace your intentional mind. So let's just put it all together one more time. If you're a slow texter, it's not because you don't care. It's because your mind is busy doing some heavy lifting, it's practicing cognitive inhibition, it's protecting its energy, it's untangling complex thoughts, and it's regulating its emotions. These are not weaknesses. They are the hallmarks of a deep and thoughtful person. So please remember this. You are not strange or rude or antisocial for taking your time. Your mind is simply wired differently. It's wired for depth, for intention, and for its own sense of peace. And that just leaves us with one final thought to ponder. The next time you find yourself pausing before hitting send, or maybe you notice someone else taking their time, just ask yourself, what does this communication style really say about the incredible, complex way that person's mind actually works?